from all the monsters out there, which one would you say that had the biggest impact on you as a child? Was it the vampire, the witches, were mummies, zombies, ghosts, or maybe werewolves? If the last one is the one that impacted you the most, then today's review is for you. I'm going to be talking about this book, Mad Dog, by J.R. Park from the Sinister Horror Company. And I'm going to take you through a journey through this book, and we're going to be analyzing the monstrosity from the outside and the inside of humans and maybe not so human beings. So see you now. Hello Gothic friends, this is Alice and you are in Gothic Land. So today we're going to be talking about the werewolf by reviewing this great book called Mad Dog. And why I'm doing this? I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because this month of May, the idea is to do a section or a series of videos talking about monsters. I already have another video defining the monster, so if you go and you have a look around, you will see why. And I thought that the monster is one of the topics in the Gothic that we can talk about for a long time. It has a lot of areas. And last week we talked about the monster book from using this book, Church Curiosities, Strange Objects and Bizarre Legends by David Castleton. And I chose this because it has folklore, yes, and the where the monsters appear, how they appear through the folklore in this book. There are other elements, but the monsters appear there. So today what I wanted to do was to analyze a novel. And why Mad Dog? Well, Mad Dog is a book that I was introduced to when I was interviewing the author, publisher J.R. Park, and Tracy Fahey in one of the other videos interview with the author during the Easter time. That is also in the channel. And he mentioned this book because the werewolf for him was one of these monsters that affected him as a child, and they probably made him transition from, as he says, from playing with dinosaurs to loving horror. So it's an important book for the writer because it made him transition, but also because J.R. Park is one of the collaborators we are going to have this July in our series of workshops that we're preparing for kids between 10 and 18, so kids and teens from 10 to 18, and he's one of the people that is going to collaborate. And so I would like to bring you a little bit his work, so then you can see who your kids are going to be with. Don't panic, because he's a really nice person, even though the book is a little bit bloody. Okay, but okay, what I want to do is to analyze it. I want to go from the big parts, the big elements, so from the outside to the smaller parts and elements of the book, right? So the first thing I want to talk about is the cover. As you can see, lately I've become a little bit of a fetish with covers, and I just love looking at them and analyzing why the authors and why the publishers and editors they chose these covers, or they've chosen the selection, yes, and you see that I talk about it sometimes in the videos too. So in this case, obviously we have this figure of the werewolf that is interesting because it's on this surface, yes, it's above this other gray color that represents probably the prison and the concrete and the block buildings. And we have the name of the author and a very important element. We have the moon, obviously. For when we have werewolves, we need the moon, and we are all monsters on the inside. A very important phrase for the book, and you will see why when you read it. So at the back, like in every book, we have a bit of the blurb of the book. Yes, for those who are learning what this means, what it is, it's called blurb. And we have a bit of a quote from Father Matthews, one of the characters inside, from the prison chaplain. And you don't need my expert opinion of the esoteric to know there was something very, very wrong with him. That's the quote that we have to get us hooked. Okay, so why is this important as well? It's important because in the middle of the story, we have, in the middle of the book, it's divided by, the chapters have got also the division of this picture of the cover, which makes it all nice, and it fits very well with the structure and the way is the book divided and how, yes? Which I will go into that in a minute. And also I don't want to show you the end. So we also have a section called contributors there, okay, which makes the whole thing a little bit more realistic, even though it's a fiction book with a fiction character, but it makes it all a lot more realistic. That's one of the beautiful things that J.R. Park does in this book. He tries to bring realism and fiction together. He tries to make sense of the folklore. Okay, I'll go back to that. So when we're talking about the cover now, the inside, right, we're going to talk about the structure, right? The structure. What we have is, as I said, the division of the chapters. But what is important, now we're going to more in detail, is that this book is written through testimonies and witnesses of the different crimes the main crime, and then different crimes that appear in the book. So what we have is a very interesting following up of the format, the tradition of diary or epistolary format in the Gothic tradition, which I love. So that's one of the things that I really like from this book. So it reminds us of novels such as Dracula or Frankenstein, but it is adapted to our modern times because, as I said, we have testimonies and witnesses. So this is very useful because then, as I said before, it's kind of more objective what is happening. The narrations are points of view from different characters of the same story. So the same event, the same situation is being looked at, is being treated, is being interpreted by the characters from their own point of view, which makes it complicated to find out the truth, which is another Gothic element to give us this uncertainty. That's characteristic from the Gothic. So what we could say that we have like these little personal dramas and sub stories within the story. So in a way, this is like a matryoshka. It reminds me of these Russian dolls where we have the main story, which is the werewolf attack, and how the story starts with this werewolf attack, and then how one's sent to prison. We have, and at this point we don't know if it's a real werewolf really, or if it's a human being. Obviously we are treating this character as a human being that is changing, or we don't know if it's changing. So this blurry of, it's never clear if it's really if it's something really supernatural, or if it's all product of the mind of people's perception. So that's beautiful. So what we have is what I've called this sensation of being in this kind of traditional storytelling, where you feel like you are like Hansel and Gretel, picking all the crumbs that Little Red Riding Hood has left behind for you to find who the werewolf is. Okay, this is for me what the book is about. But at the same time, we have this multiplicity of voices that are going to start plotting up and building up this plot. So they're going to be showing us the stories from different angles. So I like this because it's like some people describe it as a jigsaw. For me, it's like a matryoshka because you can find of stories within the stories. It's another way of looking at it. But it is true that they have this Sudoku aspect of them, that everything will put together will fit into pieces of the same story. This is very interesting, and I don't think it's an easy task, an easy way of writing a book, because you have to be very consistent with your characters' personalities, and you have to make sure that nothing stays out of the logical connection and explanation. It's like writing a lot of mini books inside the big book. So then we're not sure if in the plot, if we have this supernatural animal or we have a crazy human being. And this is the doubt that we have all along throughout the whole book until the end. And I'm not going to give you the end, obviously. But I think this is very naughty of Park. Yes, he keeps us there waiting until the end, which is great. That's how good books are actually become famous, because people like this kind of thing. Okay, so as I said, I'm looking at my notes because I don't want to leave anything behind. So these other stories run parallel with the main one and making things a lot more complicated. So there's the story of the werewolf that we have at the beginning, and then once he's taken into prison, we have that there's a jailbreak. And that is going to complicate things because the jailbreak is planned during a full moon. So you can imagine what happens there. So during this development of sub-stories, we have constantly the reminder of this phrase that we are all monsters on the inside. We're constantly having this reminder. So we're reminded constantly that we're not sure who the monster is. We're looking for the physical monster, at least I did. I was looking for this werewolf. And then the word monster is used constantly to also describe people that work in the jail, like people looking after the prisoners, or the guards, or certain workers from there with the different higher ranks. So the higher the rank, the higher the monster, even we could even say. So there's something here that exactly we don't know if, because he uses science to back up some of the things that go on in the character's mind and the possible killer, this Mad Dog guy. He uses a few quotes that I really like, and I'm going to read out to you. Okay, so for example, to bring this realistic touch inside the paranormal, or to bring this realistic touch to the paranormal, he uses science to play a bit with our own train of thought, which I think we naturally do that, but he tells us, yes, that's right, you can think that, and that's allowed, because this is what I'm going to give you, because you're expecting that. So we are constantly looking for reality. We don't know if to believe this is fiction. We just want to have data, and we have real information about scientific evidence of what's happening to this man. And we want that logical explanation. This is very typical from the life and the time we're living in as well. Everything has to have a scientific explanation. So in this sense, he gives us that. He says, despite popular beliefs that the full moon influences our moods, none of these studies have been able to satisfactorily demonstrate the existence of a so-called lunar effect, which is what a lot of people think about. People think about lunar effects as something that can affect people's behaviors, making us, maybe not turning us into werewolves, but into other kinds of monsters. And that's where we have all the blending of the physical monster with the psychological monster that I was talking to you about in a previous video. Another quote on the same lines is the one that says, in 1978, the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry published the results of data analyzed to determine whether a relationship exists between the lunar synodic cycle and human aggression. So again, we are reminded that even though there's some kind of folklore and supernatural, we are looking into the science of this. Right. So now let's move on to the characters. The one thing I find out about the characters, apart from the convicts and the murderers and the jail staff that mainly are male, I have to say that maybe there's a lot of testosterone over there. We also have a couple of female characters in the book, but they're more like the victims, although almost everybody's a victim in there, I would say. But what I really love is the fact that we have a psychologist and a priest. Or maybe it's more of a psychiatrist, yeah? Psychiatrist and a priest in the crew. And this reminds me very much of Dracula. Because in Dracula, we also have these logical, scientific figures, even though the priest is more the to help us work on the mind and the soul of the person. But they also bring the humanity. And yes, they remind me of Dracula, because in Dracula we had Van Helsing, who was this kind of priest role without being extremely Catholic, because in fact, even though he carries elements of Catholicism and Christianity, he's very pagan in a lot of other senses. But then we also have the psychiatrist that in Dracula is John Seward, and is the expert that tries to analyze the monster in Dracula. So in this sense, we also have our priest and we have our female character who's the psychiatrist or the psychologist, and which one of the characters actually say, I'm not sure if she was the right person to bring there. Remember that it's a men's jail. And so here, what is important too is the importance of the weight of the fairy tales and the legends, because in one of the quotes, one of the characters called Peter Ball, he says, the legend that spooked even the most hardened of criminals was this ghost story about the werewolf. Okay, so no, I've said that wrong. He says, even a ghost story, Peter Ball says, even a ghost story is a legend that spooked even the most hardened of criminals. And when he talks about ghost story, he's referring to the story of the werewolf, right? So this is as for characters, and I don't want to give more details because what I want you to do is to read it. For language and expressions, okay, I have to say that this book, it might not be of everybody's liking, in the sense that there's a lot of, it's horror, right? So in horror we have blood, we have guts, we have horrible things done to the body, sorry. So we have a bit of body horror, and it's very aggressive. But I have to say that it's not overwhelming. Okay, in some cases you might read things that it can be overwhelming, but I think it's well distributed, although it's true that it's shocking, but you want to keep reading. So we have this morbid sensation of, I think that's in human's nature, that we continue reading despite of the blood and guts and the gore. But connected to that, and connected to the type of characters that we have, the language sometimes is what it is. I mean, there are lots of colloquialisms, some swearing words. I don't think it's excessive. Maybe in the first pages we do have some swearing words, also because the swearing words and certain expressions are normal. Is the vocabulary, the language of people in prison. They have their own jargon, as you know. So for someone who's learning the language, it's good, because this is the kind of vocabulary, is the kind of expressions, or it contains the kind of expressions that your normal teachers will not tell you about. And that when you travel, you would have appreciated if somebody had told you about them. Because I'm telling you from my experience, when I first traveled to the UK and I didn't know half of these words, I looked like a real idiot in front of some people when they were telling me certain things. So instead of having this face and wondering if it's been a nice compliment or not, this book can help you to figure out some of the words and expressions in the English language. So it's good because we have we can move from academic environments to more colloquial vocabulary, and also to compensate the swearing vocabulary, the swear words. I always say swearing is the swear words. We have that the descriptions are very good. And this is very important in a horror book like this, because we need adjectives that actually express and make us feel disgust, that makes us see these body parts. So it's good for body parts if you're into body parts and things that can happen to these body parts. This is a good book. So it's important to get the right adjective so we can visualize as readers what's happening, so we feel it, we sense it, and the story gets to us. So I would recommend that if you like this kind of thing, just read it, because as I said, you can learn a lot of colloquialisms, phrases that are not necessarily rude, and everyday English that you might not come across to in your classes. So why should I read it? I've already mentioned a couple of things, but let's review. Let's do a little bit of a recap. So if you are looking for modern horror and you miss the figure of the werewolf, I don't think there's been as many productions on werewolves as it's been on vampires, although sometimes they go together hand in hand. But I think there's been more of vampires than of werewolves. So if you like a little bit of modern with classic, this is for you. And the second point why you should have this book, you should read it, is if you are working on everyday colloquial English outside of the classroom, this is good because you have a great variety. Point number 3, if you don't mind a little bit of blood, gunk, and bodily horror, this is okay. It's not, there are some moments that are kind of disgraceful and it's disgusting, but if you think about it, some people actually do this and worse in wars, well, God knows that people do things like this, unfortunately. And so that's another point. So if you like reading about this kind of bodily horror and stories, but also because the story is put together in a way, in breadcrumbs, like I said before. And if you are one of those who like investigating on your own account and trying to guess before you get to the end, this book will work for you as well. And the 5th reason why you should buy it and read it is because you are wondering about fear and the human mind. This is a constant in the book. So to convince you a little bit further, I'm going to read to you 4 sentences and 4 phrases that are from the book that I really, really like and for me are key. Right, the first one is, they say there's a monster inside all of us. With money, that monster was well and truly out. That for me was, okay, this is a sentence I need to bear in mind. Another one, they say fear makes the wolf grow bigger. Well, it works in reverse too. Security makes the monster more tragic. I love these quotes, man. Number 3, we see dehumanization in the quote. Now, this is my phrase, sorry. We see dehumanization in the quote that comes now. The quote is the following: but that's not the way to kill something. This is the dehumanization part. And then it continues. Prolonged suffering should be saved for your enemies. Right? And number 4, human beings, like this one, are a social species, evolved to live in groups. But we are also a competitive creature, and destruction is as natural to us as unity. So I think what Park is actually giving us these moral phrases where he's actually been thinking philosophically about human nature. And that is why, and that's one of the points I highly empathize with, even with him. Even if this is fiction, there are so many moments where you think, yes, this probably happens, and the different reactions of people to the same situation can be so different. And we have a lot of psychological and mental issues that I think are important for us to think about, just to consider. So, recommendation of the week, Mad Dog by J.R. Park. And remember, if you like it, and even if you don't, read it. Read it because it's good fiction. Its quality is that nothing there left to its own devices. You know, everything is there for a reason, and Park is a magician in this sense. He does his job very, very well. And also because by reading him, you will also have a little bit of idea of the type of vocabulary, the language. Not all the swearing words will not be in the class, but you will have a little bit, you will feel closer to this person that we have access to in July to help us to create this fiction magazine for kids and teens between 10 and 18. If you want to know more about this workshop, please, you can go to my page, gothicalice.com, and you will see there the button that says Summer Workshop, and download that, be my list, and then be informed every week about everything that I do to help you, because this is a channel, this is a place where we talk about all things Gothic. I help you with your critical thinking and with your communication skills through the one of the passions that we share, which is Gothic literature, fiction, horror. So see you next time. Download, like, subscribe, share, download the workshop, and I see you in the next video. Bye bye, Gothic friends.